going to record. Okay, very good. And first of all, Stephen, how are things in East Hampton? How do you feel tonight?
Great.
Good.
Well,
Beautiful.
I always answer that question by saying I'm still vertical during the day. And I still know the difference at age 87 between day and night. But it's getting harder and harder.
No, it's not.
Well, it sounds to me like you've had a wonderful day. I know you've had a wonderful meal, and you're really here to share with us this wonderful book. And so, really, the first place I kind of wanted to start with, which I think, for somebody who is as prolific a writer as you are, Steve, and somebody who has as many interests and talents as you have, right, could be doing anything right now, could have done anything with the last, year and a half, and yet you decided to write this book, and then you decided not just to write any book. Right, as I said, this book is called Out on a Limb, Taking a Chance with Words. So can you tell us, first of all, what was the impetus for writing the book? And how did you come up with this really interesting, I think, quite provocative title? So tell us a little bit about the genesis.
What a great question. Where did you get that question from?
As I say in Hebrew, min hashamayim, which means from the sky. Basically, that is where all good questions come from.
Didn't I send you
Perhaps a
that?
little bit of help, from along the way.
Okay. Well, anyway, why did I write the book and why is it called Out on a Limb? I would say March 2020, both Celia and I had COVID, and both of us thought we were going to die, and obviously we did not. But when we recovered, the pandemic was in full swing, and it was very hard to socialize. And I had uh, a whole compilation of essays and articles and songs and eulogies that I had written over the past several decades. Uh, and so I decided to compile them into a book and share them with my children, my grandchildren, my friends. I knew that I was not going to make a lot of money at this with this book, and that it was just written as a labor of love. And I really enjoyed writing and putting everything together. And I don't need the money. I have all the money I will ever need if I die by 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Which I should make a pitch right now. The book is available to purchase on Amazon or at your local bookstore. But in any case,
I don't need the money, so you don't have to buy it. If you want
But
a
you
copy,
should. It's fun.
well,
You
you can
have a
get it
good
at the
read.
East Hampton um, bookstore, the Hampton
Bookhampton.
Bookhampton, and so Out on a Limb. Where did I get the title? Well, I happen to have built a treehouse on our property a number of years ago. And we had a big celebration. We invited 50 people for brunch, and we had live music, and we had there's my treehouse. So that's one view of it. There's a second view of it, which I think is a
That's
little bit.
lovely view,
That's a
though.
nice view. But I built that with my own hands, and it was a form of therapy. People said, "Did you build that for your grandson or your grandchildren?" I said, "No, I built it for myself because I'm a kid at heart." And we had 50 people. We had music. We had Rabbi Zimmerman, Cantor Deborah Stein from the Jewish Center, and they blessed the treehouse. And we put a mezuzah on it, and it may be the first treehouse in the history of Judaism that has a mezuzah on it. It's possible. I didn't research. It's a researchable question. And I wrote a song, and I'm going to sing it for you now, if I can remember the words. Up there, up in my treehouse, when winds blow, the trees sway like ships at anchor. Am I afraid? Oh no. And Celia's staying next to me. And so I said, she said, don't build a treehouse. What's it for? I said, if I don't build it, I will be Steve no more.
Very
bravo.
sweet.
Anyway, so let me finish the story about the treehouse. As I was designing and building the treehouse, I was working with very challenging clients in Manhattan. They're called lawyers.
Mhm.
Lawyers are very difficult people to have as clients because they're very smart and they're very demanding. And so this was a form of holiday from the lawyers. And so it took place by, I had to assemble the lumber on the ground and all my tools. And then I had to build a scaffold, a ladder, and up high. And so I understood that it took place at a low level and at a very high level. And I realized that the same thing happened with the construction of my marriage. It took place at a very low level and a very high level. And furthermore, since Celia was married twice, and since I am married twice, and this is the best of two marriages, I realized that there were parallels between constructing a marriage and constructing a treehouse. And I wrote about this, and it's in the book. And both of them take place at a low level and a high level. Both of them require planning, but most important, you have to measure twice and cut once.
That's what the Moyle says too. I think it's good business in general.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Oh, so
this
That's
we
is
got a triple coincidence here. Circumcision, marriage, and treehouse. Wow.
so in the next revision of the book, you might add that extra layer into it,
Yeah.
but perhaps it's a different kind of book. No, but that's such a lovely image, really, of the creation of this really remarkable structure. And I remember the first time that I met you guys, you invited me and Lou over to the house when we first got out to Sag Harbor, and I think you invited me up to the treehouse, and I took one look at you and one look at it, and I trust you to the end of the world, but I think there's a part of me that just belongs on the ground. That's just part of it. But I have nothing but the utmost respect for my clergy colleagues across town who did a wonderful job of putting the mezuzah up. And I am very curious. I now have work to do to investigate. Is this in fact the first mezuzah on a treehouse in the entire world? And it would seem, very appropriate if that were in fact the case. You are both of you, I think, natural leaders in this kind of way. But certainly the book I think does a wonderful job of certainly telling stories that are meaningful to you, Steve, and to you, Celia. But I think because you're able to then take the story and broaden it out, right? In other words, it's almost like a sermon, right? That you take the story as an illustration of a larger point, and I think that really comes across. And I think leading with the story of building the treehouse is really a natural choice for the book. So I really
So,
love it.
so the title has many different layers to it. Not just I was out on a limb building the treehouse. I go out on a limb every morning when I wake up and meet the nicest smart person, the smartest nice person I have ever met, my wife. And when I say good morning, you know what they say. If a tree falls in the forest and my wife is not there to hear it, is it still my fault? So she gives me a kiss no matter what I say, and I'm off and running for the day. Um, I forgot what I was going to say, but
No, but that is a beautiful anecdote. And I think if you're going to go out on a limb, you got to know that somebody has your back
okay,
also.
but I now
Right.
remember.
Yeah,
So
right.
out on a limb, every time I write something, an essay, and it gets published, I'm out on a limb.
Mhm.
Figuratively speaking, I'm out there. So when I was 20, I I thought that I worried what people would say or think about me. And by the time I was 40, I didn't care what they said about me. By the time I was 60, I discovered they weren't talking or thinking about me at all. And now that I'm in my 80s, I can't hear a thing anyway.
Oh.
But it's like last time. I feel like we need to have the rim shot ready to go.
All right,
But
drum roll.
but I think that the being out there part of it, right? All joking aside, right, is one of your great qualities, Steve. And I think that actually as a part of the sort of zeitgeist that we're in right now is the question about how does one continue to be sort of out there, right? To say things that may be potentially provocative or at the very least conversation starting.
Well, one
And
answer to that,
Wait.
I'm sorry, one answer to the question, how does one get, is that you got to choose the right grandparents.
I think I did well in that regard. I probably wouldn't be talking to you if that hadn't been the case. That's for sure.
Yeah.
but again, it takes a certain amount of both courage and also a certain amount of temperance, right? To know when the time is to speak and when the time is to go out on that proverbial limb. And I think that that's really, it's a really wonderful kind of image to begin the book and to begin the process of really all of these vignettes, all of these little stories. And thinking about that, because I know it's very hard, right? Every piece of writing that a person does, especially a person like yourself, Steve, it's a part of you, right? It's a part of your heart. But as we know, as you said so beautifully, right, that you two are a partnership, right? You are together in this. And while Steve, I know you're the author in writing it, at least in the time that I've known the two of you, that you work together so beautifully as a team. And so I'm curious, Celia, given all of the essays in the book and that you have at least lived some of them, or at the very least heard the stories yourself, what's one of your favorites, right? If you can't pick your absolute favorite, what's one of your favorite stories in the book?
Well, I think one that I was thinking about today was Steve's Costco birthday, because I thought he was crazy when he said, I think I want to have my birthday party at Costco. And he decided that he was going to take the people who meant something to him, his sister, his daughter, his grandson, and take them all,
Celia.
and me, and take us all to Costco. And we were each supposed to get a big one of those big carts and fill it up with whatever we chose to purchase. But we weren't going to purchase it, Steve was.
Yes,
So
so instead of receiving gifts, I was giving gifts on my 85th birthday, and we met at the cash registers. They had these huge carts.
yeah,
It was very
everybody's
long.
been
Yeah,
there.
but they're giant carts. And I said, okay, meet me at the cash register in 15 minutes and fill them up with whatever you want. And like I said, I had so much money, I could afford this. And my grandson came in to the cash register, came out of the cash register, $700 of electronics. And my 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 daughter came in with about $200 of bags of rice. And my sister didn't buy anything. My best friend didn't buy anything. But Celia bought a $15 birthday cake. $15 birthday cake. Not buttercream, just regular.
The size
And
of a
then
house, probably.
so I
Right.
paid for this very gladly, and everybody was happy and jumping around. And we adjourned to the cafeteria, which is part of the Costco in Manhattan.
With that horrible food,
It has horrible food, horrible gourmet food, hot dogs, garlicky hot dogs, French fried potatoes. It has slices of pizza and Carvel ice cream and plastic spoons, plastic forks. And the cafeteria was full of people, and we commandeered a table. And Celia put some plastic 8 and a plastic 5 on and lit the candles. And people at my table, our table, all my family, loved ones, sang happy birthday. But strangely, very strangely, everybody in the cafeteria started singing along. And it was very poignant. These people were complete strangers. And then my daughter had the brilliant idea, let's cut up the cake in so many pieces that everybody in the room could have a slice. And they, on paper plates with plastic forks, we handed out the birthday cake to everybody in the room. And one by one, they came over to me and they said, Mister, you did a great thing for us today, and God bless you. I got a lot of God blesses.
It's
And
very
let me just read and some of them said, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Here's my wife, meet my wife. And they lingered. We chatted some more. They radiated a warm glow. I basked in it and symmetrically re-radiated warmth and a glow.
Mhm.
And then the penny dropped. I was now officially an old man.
Yeah, that's a nice essay.
A wise man, I think, indicated
Yeah,
by the story itself. I'm starting to think that maybe for the temple, we ought to go and get a Costco cake and stand outside and hand out Costco cake, because clearly it has an almost spiritual effect on people. I also
Right.
would say that your idea for a birthday is truly brilliant. I remember when I was a kid, there was a show called Supermarket Sweep, and you'd have to go through the supermarket and you try to take all the food that you could to get the highest price. But I'm really thinking actually that it's something of a Rorschach test, that all of us should probably go to Costco and see
Yeah.
what would we do if we were just told put whatever you want in the basket, right? It probably says more about us than anything else. And I know that Costco well, so so
And
Celia,
Don,
I could understand why that was a favorite story, both lived and read, for
and
sure.
Don Lemon, spoke about when he spoke to our group, the Social Justice Committee at the church, he spoke about the need to relate more to people outside of your own community, like our Jewish community. So this was such a good example of that, because most of the people were Latin Americans, and they were so pleased and happy to be a part of this. It felt like a really good way of connecting with a totally different population.
Right. And in that moment, right, going out on a limb, doing something that otherwise nobody would have thought to do, right, changed your lives, changed the lives of strangers that you wouldn't have met. And I think you're absolutely correct, Celia, right? There is something in all the humor of it, right? And let's be real, there is some great humor in it. Right. There is a real serious heart to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Absolutely.
really it's lovely. It's just
Well, the
lovely.
portion for my 83, my second bar mitzvah at age 83 and my first bar mitzvah at age 13 was the same. Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Mm. So tell me a little bit more about this. Tell all of us a little bit more about this, right? Perhaps not the average experience, right? Having a second bar mitzvah, let alone one, at the age of 83. So first of all, tell us a little bit about what was the thing that spurred you to do it in the first place, and then tell us maybe a little bit of something that surprised you from the experience, right? Something that maybe you weren't expecting, that changed in you as a result of it.
Mhm.
Well, I certainly got older. That did change. But when I was 13, I was forced by my parents, I mean, gently forced, and I acquiesced to have a bar mitzvah. And it didn't mean very much to me um, then. But by the time I was 70, which is 70, the biblical age of man and woman in the Bible, uh, there is a belief among some Jewish people that you're starting a second childhood. So 13 years after age 70, 70 plus 13, I think we can all do that, is 83. And it meant something to me then. And I joked that, wow, Judaism had changed in 70 short years, out of millennia, from something I didn't like to something I did like. And actually, it was me that it had changed in 70 years. And I had changed a lot. I became, and still become, more and more religious the older I get. We had a dialogue about this a couple of weeks ago, Dan and I, online, about religion and science. I don't think we covered the topic. I think we have to do another session of that, but not
Works for
now.
me. After the holidays, maybe. But yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
That would be
So
wonderful.
I had to think hard. I hired a cantor so I could learn to chant the portion, and I had to write an interpretation of love your neighbor as yourself. And I wrote 8 minutes. It took me 3 months to write 8 minutes. It's much harder to write short. And let me read a section briefly from
That would be wonderful.
my my drash. Ve'achafta l'reacha kamoka. You shall love yourself, neighbor or fellow as yourself. Everyone knows this, but the trouble with what everyone knows is that we don't know it with enough enthusiasm and conviction to act upon it fully. This is the hardest mitzvah to implement. But Maimonides interprets this, and Judaism recognizes that love and emotions cannot be commanded. Judaism does not compel faith, it compels action. I'll briefly another sentence. Judaism is a science, from my point of view, of practical ethical behavior. And it asks only that we perform acts of love and loving kindness in hopes that these actions lead to love itself. That's just an excerpt from the 8 minutes. But I think I changed by writing those 8 minutes. It forced me to think about what was important in my life. And also writing the book forced me to think about what's important. And what's important is my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my friends, and my rabbi.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm humbled to be on that list. I appreciate that very much. But I think the beginning of that list is the most important, and I think something that really, again, we can all take away and appreciate, right? Is certainly, the last year I think has caused a lot of us to consider, right? What are the things we really want to put our energy towards? What are the values that really mean the most to us? And I think given the life-changing experience that the two of you had in fighting COVID so early on, especially when so little was known, really, it's part of my sort of interest actually. And one of the vignettes is really about the last year, and I think it's called viral happiness, right?
Oh.
So how did the two of you,
Oh,
right?
oh,
Give us a little window into the world.
Yeah, I
What the
wrote
last
an
year
essay
was like.
about viral happiness. And it was an essay, it was for the East Hampton Star. And the purpose was to suggest to readers that how they could pass the time of day without socializing. And I came up with a whole menu of brain puzzlers and brain teasers, and I can give you one or two of them if you're interested. Something to think about. Let's see, should I give you an easy one or a hard one? Let me give you
Were
an
you
easy.
testing me? That's not going to be good.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Give me
test
some
you.
Talmud. I can
Okay,
answer
no,
that.
Okay, this is a test. I know you're really smart. And if you don't get it, you're in good company because I didn't get it and J. Robert Oppenheimer didn't get it.
Okay, good.
Here's the puzzle.
Fellow Fieldston alum.
Okay, so
Yeah.
imagine you're sitting in a boat, a rowboat, in your pool, if you have one. If you don't, you got to use someone else's pool. So you're sitting in the rowboat in a pool. The rowboat is in the pool. You're in the rowboat. There's a huge rock in the rowboat, and you push the rock over the side of the rowboat, and it sinks to the bottom and stays there. So here's the Talmudic question: is the water level in the pool higher, lower, or stays the same? And it's not stays the same. It's not stays.
Thank you for eliminating that possibility. That was going to be my answer. So we're already off to a good start, I would guess.
Do you want to come back to this? Should we do a
I know that
I'll tell you what, if anybody wants to know the
I was
answer,
going to say,
they can ask it at the Q&A.
good. We'll get the answer at the end. Now my brain is percolating, but
I can't remember the answer, but I can explain
let's,
it.
let's just point out for the posterity though, there's a reason I'm a rabbi and not a physicist. Right? And our other doctor on the call has an answer.
One.
Right?
Let me give you another brain teaser.
Alan Feisman's rises. So
Wait, I want to say something about, you ask about the recovery from COVID, and we were written up in the East Hampton Star, as you know, because as you said, it was quite early and people were curious, and they said, how did you recover? And one of the things we mentioned was faith. And we had you as our faith person, and I called you, and I was very, very sick, obviously. And I said, Dan, can you record for me the Mishaberach on my phone? And I'm going to just keep playing this until I feel better. And you said, well, as soon as I put my daughter to bed, I'm going to record this for you, Celia. And your lovely voice, it was so meaningful. And I played that over and over again. And it was really an important part of just feeling the healing power.
But we were both in bed 11 hours a day, sleeping, and then taking 3 naps a day. And I was coughing so hard, I thought my rib cage was going to break. And we really thought we were going to die. Anyway, my grandson, Yasha, I hope he's on the meeting. Hello, Yasha. would come every day, and he would clean the apartment. He would bring food. He would cook food, and thereby earned his inheritance.
All right.
Well, I just very on a very personal level, I appreciated so much that it meant so much to the two of you, and I think in thinking about the last year, and it's really interesting, right? The question about faith in a
Mhm.
pandemic, it can go in either direction,
You're
right? People
right.
can lose faith or they can gain
Mhm.
faith. I suppose if we're going to go the mathematic rate, that can always stay the same as it were. But I think,
Mhm.
part of what makes you guys unique, and I think, again, what's emblematic in the book is the ability for reflection, right? For consideration of
Mhm.
not just living through the experience, but then asking the existential questions that arise from it, right?
Mhm.
The two of you, through, a combination of willpower, and the sort of the smarts to know what you needed to do to take care of yourselves both
Mhm.
physically and emotionally, right? But you make it out the other side. It's similar, actually, if I remember correctly, Steve, that you wrote your last book right after having lived through the stroke, right? The sense of
Mhm.
you've made it to the other side, and what are we going to do with it, right? And that's why, sort of jokingly at the beginning, I said, you could have done anything over the last year, but in real seriousness, I think
Mhm.
actually the decision to take the time to take some of these stories again with a purpose to not just entertain, but to elicit a certain kind of thoughtful response. Really is a very is really laudable. Is really something that I think is quite special, and I want to thank you
Thank,
both for
thank you for
doing
that.
Thank
that.
Yeah, but now from the sublime to the ridiculous.
you.
You
And
know, I like ridiculous. I live ridiculousness.
the ridiculous is that I love being the center of attention.
No, no,
Yeah, it's
no,
true. It's,
no.
I know, you just have to grant me a little bit of the.
That's granted, granted.
So why do I love being center? I don't know. I got plenty of attention as a kid, and in fact, I think I wanted to get attention from my parents. I was the
Uh,
oldest, uh, but I always tried to make them laugh, and I think I've spoken to professional comics about this, and they tell me that they did. I'm not a professional comic. I'm not even an amateur, but
So we have the humor
well,
group,
we have the
I
humor.
was just gonna
There's an
say.
article, there's
which
another
we
essay
love.
on that in the book. Uh, but I think that making my parents laugh, uh, I must have figured out that they would love me more if I could make them laugh. I don't know if that was, I think they love me plenty. Uh, but I've always wanted to be the center of attention. It's an entirely desirable trait. Um, but I don't know how, you don't want to go there, right?
I no, I think look, if there's one thing that I've learned about Judaism is that it's not generally telling us to be in one extreme or the other, right? That
Mhm.
oftentimes it's about understanding and having the wisdom to know when to be one and when to be the other, right? When to be the center of attention, right? In order to draw people in, to bring humor into a situation, to continue a conversation, and when to give space to others. There's actually a great sort of concept in Judaism that's called oh, it's escaping me now, but it has to do with basically when God created the universe, God essentially has to remove God's self from space in order to create, right? That there has to be something of a drawing back. And that's a balancing act, right? And I think it's a credit to you to know that there are times where being the center of attention is a laudable thing. And there are times where maybe perhaps it's something, right, that you're working on, just like all of us have things that we're working on. But the one thing
Mhm.
I'll just ask is, don't overcompensate or overcorrect. Okay. We need you at the temple to be a source of conversation, right? A source of humor. And
Yes.
transitioning to that, right? I want to know a little bit, even though obviously I'm a little bit in the know here. I have a little inside baseball, but tell us about this Jewish humor group at the temple, right? I don't,
Yeah.
I'm sure many temples probably have a humorous group of people that in some way or another know each other, but I don't know whether in fact there are a whole lot of Jewish humor groups within temples. So
Mhm.
perhaps, tell us a little bit about the
Okay.
genesis and about what's been so
So,
enjoyable about it.
so
Sure.
6 years ago, we left the Jewish Center of the Hamptons, where we were married almost 40 years before, and we came to Addis, Israel, and that's when we met you, I think. And um, I don't know. I started being a wise guy and telling jokes, and somehow we decided that there was an audience, there were participants who would like to meet once a month or and have a potluck supper and tell jokes. And we decided they should be Jewish jokes, but nobody could define what was a Jewish joke. But I did write an essay for the East Hampton Star about this, and I can't find it right now. But I tried to quote um, a Jewish scholar on the subject of Jewish humor, and he said whatever is interesting to Jews, status, money, education, racism, uh, foibles, all of that is stuff that Jewish humor. Uh, oh, I got to tell
And
you
we
a
were
Jewish.
lucky to
Can I
have.
tell you a Jewish joke right now? Is that an appropriate drop in here?
It depends on the
It's
joke and
clean.
whether
It's
we're going to
clean.
get in trouble from it.
Clean. No.
But I'll go out on a limb and I will say
Okay.
let's do it.
I'm going out on a limb too.
Fair.
So this one's clean. Um, uh, so in the 1950s, very few Israelis could afford to travel. But on this one occasion, an Israeli came to New York and he met a New Yorker. And the New Yorker says, I haven't met many Israelis. I guess you can't afford to travel much, but here you are. So tell me, how are things in Israel? And the Israeli says, good. They talk loud, they talk loud. And the New Yorker says, well, could you elaborate? Could you add a few more details to the story, about what's going on in Israel now? And the Israeli says, certainly. Not good. Now, I have told this joke 100 times to Jewish people and not Jewish people. And almost invariably, Jewish people understand the joke. They may not think it's funny, but they understand it because it's Talmudic on the one hand, but on the other hand, and there's a certain duality.
My oldest friend from high school is waiting to get in.
Really?
Who's that? Because I think there's nobody in the waiting room.
John and Abelise.
Oh, I let John in. So John
good.
actually,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, great. So and non-Jewish people don't think it's funny or they don't understand it or both. And I thought that was interesting. The other interesting thing that we noticed in the Jewish humor group, we were about, 8 or 10 couples at the beginning, and we still meet, is that all of the men, the husbands, could tell a Jewish joke off the top of their head, but none of the women could tell a joke off the top of their head. And when it was their turn to tell a joke, they usually read them.
Well, we're practicing.
Yeah. Now, this is not to say that there aren't famous Jewish women comedians like
They're getting to be more.
And they're getting to be more. But this is embarrassing, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So we were years ago, we were having brunch, and I'm going to drop a name here, with Gloria Steinem and her then boyfriend, who shall be nameless, who is a friend of ours, in his baronial oceanfront mansion. And we were chatting and talking nice, educated conversation, sophisticated. And I decided to tell a Jewish joke. And I'm not going to tell you which one because it was lousy, but it went over like a lead balloon and nobody laughed. And I was really hurt. And then Gloria said, isn't it interesting? This is an exact quote. Isn't it interesting that men like to tell a joke to take control of the conversation? And right away, I turned red. I was embarrassed. I felt this small. And people said that was a nasty thing for her to say. But I took it personally because that's exactly what I was trying to do. And I think men do that. Women want to talk about their feelings. They don't want to take control of the conversation. So I remembered that. And I told that story at the Jewish humor group. And they all resonated with that. Anyway.
Well, we were lucky.
Yeah, causing the rabbi who tells jokes to really contemplate the joke telling now. Now I've got having something of an
Yeah.
existential crisis. I'll wait for that. It's a good time of year to have an existential crisis.
Anyway, but the Jewish humor group has flourished and thrived
we
over
have
the years.
Judy
And we have
Spencer.
Judy Spencer and Mike Klinghoffer,
Who are
who
professional
are professional
humorists.
humorists, and they write a script every Rosh Hashanah and Passover. We have the Rabbi of Oz as a musical. We have a couple of others. Judy, you remind us the names of the others, and we have a lot of fun. We have more fun putting on a very poor amateur performance of the Rabbi of Oz with the script written by Mike and Judy and performed by us thespian Jewish humoristas. And we had, I think, an audience of maybe 200 people at a couple of these, with a lot of children giggling over our amateur acting. But a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And anybody who wants to join the Jewish Humor Group, please feel free.
No, it's been really one of the great highlights during my time, certainly at the temple, and really, all credit to you and to the fellow members, because it's entirely lay-led, entirely lay-driven, and and I think makes for a very interesting story in the book. You get a little bit of that color in the essay that you wrote, and it's really, really wonderful. Now, shifting gears just a little bit before we open up to a little bit of QA to round out our evening. You do also have some pretty serious stories here, and stories from your past, and one in particular, that really touches on the combination again of your sort of Jewish values, your inherent values, and your experience as a scientist, and during a particular period of time in which you helped 400 Russian Jewish scientists to emigrate and to reach, in essence, true freedom for the first time in their life. So can you tell us a little bit about that essay in the book, and a little bit about that story?
Sure, that was probably my finest hour. I didn't help them emigrate. They emigrated here through the Jewish agencies. At the end of Glasnost and Perestroika, I guess it was Reagan and Khrushchev worked out a deal where Jewish people in Russia who had been persecuted for centuries and were still being persecuted, if they could prove that they were being persecuted, the Jewish agencies would finance their transport to the United States and to Israel. About 500,000 of them came to the US, and about 2 or 3 million, I think, came to Israel, which is ironic because the population was so small. A couple of percent of the ones that came to the US were PhDs and double PhDs from very fine institutions of higher learning in the former Soviet Union. You may know that Russia has a great tradition of not only chess, but mathematics and physics. And these were double PhDs, and some of them were driving cabs when they got here. And one of them somehow found his way to my office. And he said, I heard something about you. Maybe you could help me get a job here. I said, do this, 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 and this. And in 2 weeks, he had a job. And not only that, he told all of his fellow expatriates in Brighton Beach, where a lot of them lived, that if they went to Dr. Rosen, he would help them figure out how to get a job in the United States. Now, you have to understand, they came from a very strange place. Russia, and I think it's still somewhat the same. They had sayings, folk sayings. Say one thing, do a second thing, think a third thing, which means that you can't trust anybody, your parents or your children, because they could turn you in for not following the party line. And they had another saying, which is, bear with me a moment. I have to call it up from the random
They
access.
pretend to pay us.
Oh, yeah, they pretend. Thank you. You see why she's a great wife. Always marry somebody younger than you. Very important. They'll still have memory when yours goes. We pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. That was the Russian folk saying about the economy in the former Soviet Union. So I spoke English to them because I can't speak Russian, and I required all of them to speak. So I said, listen, capitalism Sorry, that's not how that doesn't work. You can't pretend to work, and they don't pretend to pay you. They pay you in real dollars if you produce real value. And the New York Times came and did a wonderful story. It was called The 12-Step Process of Capitalism for Emigres. If you Google capitalism for emigres in the New York Times, you will find this wonderful article written about by a wonderful Times reporter who actually became head of the Jerusalem bureau, news bureau, and it told it's published. The New York Times article appears in the book, and I could read some of it to you, but maybe you could find it yourself. And then a friend of mine who happens to have a Nobel laureate named Roald Hoffman wrote a blurb for the book. And he said on the back of it, the book that came out was sponsored by the Alfred P. Sloan Fund. I forgot to tell you that. And Roald Hoffman wrote a book, said, if I needed a career, this is the one book I would read. That was the book that Celia and I wrote called Career Renewal. And it was financed and funded by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which had a programmatic interest in science and technology workforce issues, of which this was one. And not only that, they pointed out that American PhDs in physics and mathematics didn't know how to market themselves either, just like the Russians didn't know how to market themselves because we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. So
That was a wonderful
so the
thing
book,
that you did.
yeah, the book was commissioned by the Sloan Foundation, and it was published, and it sold a lot of copies
Here
because,
comes your
and
daughter.
here comes your daughter stealing my center of attention.
You want to know what the book was about?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's
Anyway,
a wonderful thing that you
The
did,
book sold a
Steve.
lot of copies, and the methodology of the book, which was how scientists could learn to market themselves with dignity and with integrity, not like a used car salesman. And we developed methods to do this that were evidence-based, and lawyers and doctors also were able to use the same book because the methods were the same for scientists as well as for lawyers and doctors. And Celia is the country's leading expert on the career
Right.
problems of lawyers.
Well, let's stick with the Russians.
But
We're not
that's
interested
all
in
in the book.
Well, that's,
Okay.
now we're waiting for Celia's book, right? How to deal with lawyers. That's, that's
No, how
important
not,
follow-up.
how not to be a
How
lawyer.
not to go out on a limb. That is
You know
very
what?
much, that
Not
is
to
very
go
much.
out on a
She's,
limb. Yeah.
she's too smart to be a lawyer.
All right.
All right. So on that note, I hope we don't have any lawyers on the call. Please take no offense to all of our lawyer jokes. I'm sure we do. I was going to say, Steve's waving his hand there. No offense. Trust me. Don't shoot
Yeah,
the
yeah.
That's,
Steve
Steve Buckman is a
lawyer.
lawyer
Yeah.
that Celia helped.
All
So
right.
there you go.
That's
Yeah, and he's
right.
now famous because of her help.
He's
He's a-
holding up his
He's a
finger.
brilliant lawyer. Brilliant lawyer.
Very nice. Now, so here's a chance
Was.
to ask Steve or Celia questions. Ideally about the book itself, but we'll go where the conversation goes. For those of you that have some familiarity with Zoom, the easiest way to do this is towards the bottom of your screen. There's a little button that says reactions, a little smiley face and a plus. And if you hit that, then there should be another button that says raise hand. If you'd rather do it the old school way and just raise your hand, I'll see you. If you have any questions you'd rather just put in the chat, I'm happy to pose them to Steve and Celia as well. And then if you have a question, I'll bring you up onto the virtual stage to ask it yourself if you'd like. So do we have any starters? Anybody wants to prime the pump this evening?
Well, I can answer the question.
No, we got
and
you.
ask. Oh, Steve.
It's a very important thing they
Yeah.
taught us at school, right? You have to give time for people. So Steve, we're going to first add you as a spotlight, and we're going to ask you to unmute. So you should have a little button that just says unmute, and there we go. We should be able to hear you now. And go ahead, ask your question.
First, I want to make a comment. I first knew Celia, who helped me into my second career,
Yeah.
for which I always thank her. because I say, as a lawyer on a scale of 1 to 10, that was an 8. What I did afterwards as a career counselor has been an 11
Oh, that's
on a scale of
wonderful.
1 to 10. So
Happy
forever
that
grateful.
that worked.
Thank you.
Forever grateful. So
Yeah.
my quick question was, and it's a little simplistic, but I asked students similar questions. Steve, on a scale of 1 to 10, again, a little simplistic, how would you rate the aging process? Obviously, from a personal level, how would you rate the aging process?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but sometimes I talk like one. And I'm going to tell you why I look so good at age 87. 1, I chose the right grandparents. 2, I'm happily married. 3, I love my work. 4, I take a nap every day, and on a good day, I take 2 naps. 5, I act immature. And 6, when Linus Pauling, who won 2 Nobel Prizes, one in chemistry and one in peace, was asked at age 93, how come you lived so long? He said, always hold the banister. So that's not an answer to your question, which I forgot already what it was,
But I think,
but that may be good enough for you.
but having a second career like you did, Steve, and being able to use everything that you had gained from your first career is a wonderful way to use this part of your life.
I just remembered your question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how come I'm so old? 11.
Excellent.
I don't know how it happened. I
Very
think it
good.
had to do with my parents.
And Steve, thank you for an excellent question. We'll let you sit back into the pews, and have a question here from the Klinghoffer Spencer household here. So let's ask you to unmute and ask away.
Hi there. Okay, so every writer talks about writer's block, and especially if you're writing and you have a deadline. How have you ever experienced writer's block, and how do you get over it?
I never had writer's block. It's because I'm not smart enough to have writer's block.
I don't know about that. That's
All right.
You just have a different kind of shape.
Here's
maybe it's
another
not a block.
question for you. Do you feel a kinship to Abraham Lincoln now that you are 77?
Well, oh, I didn't know the man. I didn't know him. Was he Jewish? I mean, if he was, I would feel
His beard looks that
If
way.
he
I was just
I
going to
would
say
feel-
he had
I
a
would
nice
feel a
comedic
kinship
beard.
with him if he was Jewish.
Well, those are our wonderful humorists, which you just got a little opportunity, a glimpse of seeing how great they are and how funny they are. We're so blessed to have them with us at Addis Israel.
Absolutely. Well said. And I think, Judy, it's a great question though, right? And I think perhaps, right, we can learn a lot from Steve, which is, don't let anything stop you. Just keep plowing ahead, right? Just keep writing.
People say I have a joie de vivre and élan vital, whatever that is. And so I suggest that maybe you should work on your élan vital, whatever that is, and your joie de vivre, and you won't have writer's block.
Is there a Hebrew equivalent of all these phrases? I wonder. It probably wouldn't sound the same.
No,
Wouldn't sound the same. But certainly you can see what happens when our humor people get together. Lots of good things, lots of great ideas, lots of humor.
Yeah.
But Klinghoffer, Spencers, we love you very much, and really great
Yeah.
question. Great to see you. All right, so we'll let you sit back down, as it were. Okay, so any other immediate questions for Steve or for Celia or about the book itself? Well, I have one important question, certainly, which is, Steve, where is the best place to purchase the book? Where can we get it, both locally and perhaps internationally, even? Right? Our reach is great.
I don't need the money. I really don't need.
Okay, you're selling it very well here. Let's.
But you can. There are copies available in the Hampton Bookhampton in East Hampton, and online on Amazon and the other.
Barnes and
Barnes and
Noble.
Noble.
Yeah. It's $10 on online for a digital copy, and it's $20 for a hard copy. But if you can't afford it, I'll happily send you one.
But if you're in the
Walk one up.
Hamptons, it's nice to support our local bookstore because
Agreed.
it's so hard for independent bookstores now to be profitable. And they have survived, so.
Well said, Celia. Definitely, right? Bookhampton, East Hampton is a lovely, lovely place, lovely store. Go in and tell them that you know Steve and you're on the call. I'm sure he'll point you in the right direction for sure.
Right.
And I see a late hand coming back in from the Klinghoffers, and I can't say no to them. So let's put you back on and ask you to unmute and ask.
Steve, just out of curiosity, who took that great picture of you on the cover?
Oh,
That's a great
I'm
picture.
so glad you asked that question.
Good question.
My good friend, Michael Mella, who is on the Zoom today, is a great photographer, and I met him at the YMCA at the gym, and the photograph was taken here. I was hanging from a tree, although I'm not quite hanging because you see my elbows are bent. When I tried hanging, I had this frightened look on my face as if I was going to fall. We didn't think that would. I think this is a pretty good likeness, though. What do you think?
I like it.
It's a really good picture. That's why I asked.
Yeah. Mike Mella, are you there?
Well, so clearly for anybody who's planning to write their book, okay, we've got an excellent photographer for all of your cover needs. But it is a wonderful, wonderful picture, and it looks like you in your element, Steve, hanging or not hanging. Very good. All right. Thanks
So
for.
the question
thanks
has
for-
not been asked yet, but I'm going to answer it anyway. And the question is, are you Jewish? And the answer is a resounding yes. And I'm proud to be a Jew. And I like being Jewish. It's so much so that I got bar mitzvah the second time.
Yeah, you told them.
And I love Dan. We're good friends. I have a very
guys
high
later.
regard for his knowledge. And I think he might feel likewise, but I can't answer for him.
I love you guys too, and I have nothing but respect for the both of you. And I appreciate so much, what you do for our temple, for our community, but also, as you see, right, the things that writers, when they have the courage to write and to share their thoughts and feelings with others, you never know, right? It's the same story, the Costco story, right? You just don't know what you might do for somebody who is a total stranger. And I think, the last year could have caused us to isolate, right, to, pull ourselves back. And I think, by fighting against that instinct and really reaching out, right? Again, not to belabor the point, right? But going out on a limb really is I would say, a wonderful Jewish characteristic too, right? I think it's an important part of life. And I think that while things have been tested in the last year, rising to the challenge is really, again, an example that the two of you set regularly. And I really just want to thank you again for writing the book, for making time available to all of us tonight. And look forward to seeing what comes next from the two of you.
Thank
I don't know what
you.
that'll be,
You did a
but
great job, and thanks everybody for
thank you all
putting
for
up
being
with me.
on. No, quite the contrary. And really, everybody take care of themselves. Be safe out there. Be smart, and hopefully we'll have another chance to get together again soon, in person or online. It's a treat either way.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks.
Good night, everybody. Really, really
Good night.
wonderful. Thanks so much for being here.
Wow, there's a lot of people.